So we're going to talk about the Newport Jazz Festival, the first of the great jazz festivals, and some of the influences and iterations of this festival. Elaine Lorland, one of the socialites in Newport, Rhode Island, decided that she wanted to support jazz and bring jazz to Rhode Island. And she and her husband financed the very first festival in 1954. They set as a site the Newport Casino. And they hired great jazz luminaries, including Billie Holiday, to perform at that very first event. It was, by all stretches of imagination, a very successful event. Over 12,000 people over a 2-day period, mostly outside the casino on the lawn. There just wasn't room for all these people. It was just much more successful than anyone ever thought it would be. This brought about some problems. The townspeople in Newport were a little enraged at the fact that they had this traffic gridlock and these strange jazz people roaming about their community. So they started fighting back, and of course the casino would no longer host the festival, citing that there was just too many people and it probably was going to grow, and they could no longer accommodate such a robust crowd. Not to be deterred, the Lorlands bought a large compound, a mansion, and said, okay, we'll buy this big property and we'll do our festival here. And the townspeople still complained because this mansion was right in the middle of one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the area. So there was again pushback, and the festival grew by leaps and bounds, to the point that they could not even host it there at their new location. The best they could do was have receptions and parties there, and they used a nearby state park as the location for the outdoor music. And the festival is growing so fast and it's attracting younger people, college students, who can't find housing and this and that, and the gridlock is worse, and these young people are bringing tents and setting them up, and this is really offending the townspeople. And so they started fighting against it again. But it's hard to beat success. The festival was being broadcast over Voice of America all over the world. And there were live recordings being made, including Duke Ellington's famous comeback recording in, I think, '57. So the festival was there to stay. And there was nothing that could be done except to create pushback and to make it more difficult for the Lorlands. In frustration, they fell victim to the times, and they started in the 60s doing a blend of music, not just jazz, but some R&B and folk music and popular music of the era. And this even exacerbated the problem more and more and more, because you got more and more people and more gridlock and more pushback and more complaints. So in desperation, They moved the festival to New York City. George Wayne took over programming for the festival, and JVC became the financial sponsor and backer. It had grown to the point that it needed corporate and major corporate support in order to sustain the growth and bring the kind of acts that they were bringing into this festival. It did become more jazzy during this period and maintained its success, both with the recordings and the radio broadcasts. And unfortunately, as economics changed, JVC started backing out of its support. The Lowerlands still weren't that festival in Rhode Island, so for a time there was a dual festival, part of it in New York City and part of it in Newport, and that did work for a while, but once JVC pulled out, the festival did return to Newport and was more of a jazz festival again. There were some other complications in that some of the, how should I say this, less jazzy groups, it seems, were being paid more richly than the jazz legacy groups, the pioneers of this great music, and Max Roach and Charles Mingus started a smaller festival in another part of town that dealt with straight ahead jazz as a protest and a competition to the Newport Festival. They never did attract the crowds or really cause any real financial impact, but they did cause a spiritual impact because this had been a jazz festival, and the very people that the festival had sought to support were complaining of ill treatment. That was resolved. More jazz acts were being programmed, and the festival continues to be a model for festivals all over the world. It is the very first, and it did have some of the same growing pains that festivals all over the world have had in trying to maintain viability, to satisfy a wider audience, to maintain themselves on financial solid ground, and to become more inclusive in their musical offerings. Jazz is still the primary music that is programmed, but it is a blend of music that you find at most festivals now all over this country, and actually all over the world. Even festivals such as the great Montreux Festival, the North Sea Jazz Festival, which is festivals I have attended, they do also have a blending of acts, although jazz is still paramount and can be heard all through each and every single day. The legacy of the Newport Jazz Festival is that they were the first, going back in 1954, that it was at first financed privately, and that it was established to bring jazz to Rhode Island and to a part of the country that did not have the same access to jazz as, say, New York City or Detroit or Chicago or Philadelphia, etc. It has had its struggles and its up and downs, but it is still regarded as one of the finest jazz festivals in the world, and is still regarded as the mama and the papa of jazz festivals worldwide. Hats off to the Lowerlands for starting us on the journey to festive outdoor occasions to celebrate America's greatest creative music, jazz. Thank you.